about him. Dennis Kelleher, come on up here, CEO of Better Markets. His title is Meet the Bros, Crypto and Wall Street and Private Equity. Oh my. Dennis.
Hi everybody, thanks. Is this working? So Better Markets is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, DC-based organization that fights for the public interest in the economic, financial policy making across Washington, at the regulatory agencies, Congress, the White House, media. And that means we actually spend every day, all day, fighting the oligarchs and their armies of lawyers, lobbyists, and other allies, and there are lots of allies. So now, I think this goes here. So the economy and the financial system affect every single American, and yet the economy doesn't work for the vast majority of Americans and hasn't for decades. And here's a snapshot of that. So in the end of 2016, there was a survey done by the Federal Reserve, did a study that showed 90% of the American people were poorer at the end of 2016 than they were in 2007, by 17 to 35%. Astonishing, right? Not ancient history. This is from July of 2024. 39% of Americans worried they could not pay their bills. That was higher than at any time during the Great Recession after the crash of 2008. And of course, we know what that leads to. That leads not to a wealth gap, but a wealth gulf, where 10% own 67% of the wealth of the country, and the bottom 50% own 2.5% of the wealth of the country. Now, how can that be? It's because the economy is rigged against Main Street Americans, and that's because the financial system too often fails to fulfill its role to support the real productive economy. It's too often a wealth extraction mechanism for the few instead of a wealth creation system for the many. Now, after building the biggest middle class in the history of the world after World War II, how did we get here? Well, that's where the oligarchs come in. They, especially those in the financial industry, are using their economic power to buy bipartisan political power, which they actually use to protect and increase their economic power. This purchased political power rigs the economy, deregulates the financial industry, takes the cops off the financial beat, and ladles out no strings, no accountability bailouts when their self-enrichment schemes crash the economy, as happened in 2008 and in 2023. Now, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, among others, here's a snapshot of decades of deregulation, with 4 more coming under Trump. It didn't start a couple of years ago. It started with Reagan. It's bipartisan. The red colors are deregulation, and the other colors are slight interruptions of the deregulation. This, you can see a lot of this stuff at our website at Better Markets. I'm not going to go through this because we'll be here for 4 days. Now, that's the deregulation. What did it get us? The green lines here show that it took 10 years for unemployment to return to the 2007 level after the 2008 crash. The bottom line, the little red dots, show that every year that Main Street suffered, Wall Street paid itself tens of billions of dollars in bonuses. Now, importantly, this is not a partisan issue. This shows that the oligarch-purchased financial crashes slam everybody on Main Street, from New York to Montana to Texas. Now, what's the result of that? Of course, it's the wealth gulf. The wealth gulf. Finance undermines and corrupts our economy and our democracy by hijacking the government to serve its own ends. Now, whether you want to call them oligarchs, billionaires, ultra-rich, or whatever, this is what the titans of Wall Street have been doing for decades. And the same is true for the PE, the private equity kingpins, and now the crypto billionaires are joining in, pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into last year's election to buy as many politicians as possible. And at the very same time, of course, ironically, Americans have a very negative view of crypto, so it goes to show what money buys. Now, the names change a little, but the MO is the same. The ultra-rich use their money to buy and corrupt the political process. Now, what does that do? That prevents politicians from offering real solutions, structural solutions, that will attack the power centers that rig the economy and enrich Wall Street at the expense of Main Street. Now, here's just a hint of how that happens. This is a New York Times story, not The Onion, how Wall Street is subtly shaping the Harris economic agenda. Well, this one, can Wall Street help Harris win Pennsylvania? Any good ideas there? Well, guess what? Harris had a Wall Street-approved economic pitch. It fell flat. Who would have guessed that Wall Street, right? I mean, the oligarchs have spent a long time rigging the economy and the financial system to benefit and enrich themselves. They aren't going to unrig it. And those chasing their money, cashing their checks, and doing their bidding aren't going to help either. But there is another outcome possible, and Erica talked about this, Elizabeth talked about this, and it requires new ideas, it requires new laws, it requires political action, it requires lawsuits, as the Brennan Center talked about in Jesse, but it also requires fighting the economic and political power of the oligarchs now in the policy trenches, and that's what Better Markets is doing now and every day. Thank you.